Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the broadcast. My name is Dr. Brad Reedy. This is Evoke Therapy Program's podcast and broadcast. So I'm really happy to be doing this. I've been looking forward to this topic for a long time. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about attachment theory, and specifically, I'm going to share with you a children's book that I read to my children when they were young. Had no idea of the implications, and now it comes back to me in the context of this. So some of this will be review. Some of this will be new to any of the listeners in terms of my broadcast. Before I get into the content for this evening, I just want to remind you to invite you all to the Conscious Parenting Seminar. The next iteration of the Conscious Parenting Seminar, an all-day workshop with me, limited in size to 24 people so that it can be interactive. You can bring your questions, bring your case studies, which of course are your lives. And that goes from 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We'll take an hour for lunch. We'll have some small breakouts during the process. If you're interested, contact intensives@evoketherapy.com. I love this day. It goes so fast for me, and I really enjoy getting to meet and talk with all of you in a different kind of way. So with that, let's get into tonight's topic. Like I said, I'm going to talk about attachment theory theoretically. Then I'm going to read to you a children's book, and then I'm going to conclude with what we can learn, what we can draw from the book. First of all, I want to start off with this idea that when we feel safe, what that does to our nervous system. When we feel safe around someone who is safe, attachment theory explains that this sense of safety can essentially become internalized and become what we might think of as permanent. We can carry around an image of ourselves because of this relationship. When caregivers, or if you don't get it in childhood, you can do it with a therapist, but when caregivers consistently provide resonance, safety, and security, regardless of the tragedies over which parents sometimes have no control, the child develops an internal base of safety that they can carry throughout their life. The result is a secure attachment, or later on in life, it's called an earned attachment. It's a sense that one is home. It's safety, it's security. It's a feeling that we have that I'm okay. Poets and prophets often refer to this as heaven. When I'm spending my time looking and listening to what people are saying on social media and in the public and the news, I'm constantly hearing this question of how do we feel this gap, this wound that we might feel from our childhood? How do we have positive self-esteem? How do we feel good about ourselves? And people are constantly asking, how does that occur? How do you heal it if it was wounded, or if it was left as a hole or a void? And how do you repair it if you have a negative self-image? And what I want to say very simply is we repair it the same way that it's wounded. We repair it by being in a relationship with somebody. If in childhood our parents are worried, they think critically of us, they're constantly anxious about how we're doing and if we're going to be okay, the child internalizes that worry as something is wrong with me. And over time, that idea, that feeling, that sense gets hardwired into the brain. So if that's how it occurs, it can be healed or repaired in the same way. That means that we spend time around an empathic, capable, secure, and stable adult who regards us with compassion, with non-judgment, with an absence of worry and anxiety. And over time, in the same way that we might have been injured or left wanting, by exposing ourselves over time, repetitively, telling stories to our therapist, we have the sense that we're okay. So that's how it gets filled or repaired. We call that earned attachment. I've said this before. I'll recap the concepts of attachment theory and attachment-based therapy. We know two things in terms of human development. We know that a healthy or a secure attachment, that feeling that the parent has that the child is okay, that they're going to be okay, that everything's going to work out. If a healthy or secure attachment is present, that is the most significant contribution you can make to your child's mental health and development and resiliency. If you see the child and regard them with openness, with compassion, with patience, with understanding, with non-judgment. And this is where it starts to get interesting. The best predictor, mom and dad, of your ability to provide that secure attachment, to respond and feel and interact with the child in the ways that I'm describing, the best predictor is how much you've made sense out of your own life. That's really important. How much work that you've done. This is not my theory. This is what the research shows us and what the culmination of all of the master therapists have taught us. You can only take somebody as far as you've gone. I think that's why so many people have these questions about self-esteem and self-regard without an idea about how to repair it or how to fill it, is because they have no experience. Now, I have the luck, the fortunate experience of sitting across from a therapist who's capable, who understands this, who, by the way, when I thank her for what she does or what she's doing for me, she'll respond the same way that I do to clients. She'll say, I'm just doing something for you that somebody did for me. So I have the good fortune of stumbling and upon this therapist and finding her and engaging her for the last 24 years. And I have felt the difference. I felt the development of myself. I feel differently about myself today than I did 5 and 10 and 15 years ago. And by no means do I suggest to you that I'm complete or finished with the project. I just can see the progress. So the first thing we know is that a secure attachment is the number one contribution that you can make to a child's development. And the second thing is your ability to do that, to provide that, is based on your work. It's not how smart you are. It's not how good your lectures are or how charismatic or articulate you are, but rather it's how much you've unraveled your own childhood. It's not predicted. It's not predicted by how good your childhood was. And I think that's the most common mistake that people make. They think, well, if I had a childhood that was fairly good enough, at least I have no noticeable trauma that I can identify. If I had a pretty good childhood, had a pretty stable child, if I turned out okay, that's what a lot of parents and adults think. If I turned out relatively okay, meaning that I'm functional in society, then I can provide my child what they need. That's not the case. So how successful you are, how smart you are, how articulate you are, how reasonable you are, how rational you are, that's not what predicts it. It's how much you understand your own childhood. You look back on your own childhood critically. And I don't mean negatively. I mean critically, like a critic would. You can see the dilemmas. You can see the issues. You can see the messages. You can see your parents' limitations. You can see how you've internalized those limitations and they become a part of you. That's the predictor. If you want to know what attachment looks like, the best way that I can describe what a healthy attachment looks like, and this is a really crude way of describing it, I put this in the Audacity to Be You, it's responses like this. Responses like, thank you for telling me. Tell me more. I appreciate knowing. I'm glad that you told me. Thanks. That sounds hard. I'm sorry. I'm here. I'm listening. You're not alone. That makes sense. Is there anything I can do for you? How can I support you? You must have a good reason for whatever this is that you're doing. I'd like to understand. What can I do to support you? Or I can relate. That's what it sounds like. And that's the best way that I can operationalize it. That's what it feels like. That's the energy. What it doesn't look like is responding to somebody with phrases and energy like, that's silly, you're overreacting, you're too sensitive, you're scaring me, you're selfish. You should, and giving advice. Don't pay them any mind, they're just jealous. Ignore them. You'll get over it. Look on the bright side. Why did you do that? Right? That shaming kind of accusation that's framed in the form of a question. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? That's just your depression, your insecurity, your anxiety speaking. That's what a lack of attachment sounds like. The lack of a secure attachment. That's the best way that I can describe it. The quality of your childhood doesn't predict whether you can provide a healthy attachment. You can have a relatively good childhood, but if you haven't done the work to sort it out, you'll be limited in your ability to parent. So what's the implications of all of this? The implications of this, of course, are do your work. A secure attachment, or in adulthood, we call it an earned attachment, is when you are seen by one person. You don't spend your life trying to be seen by every person. And I think all of us can relate to that. Have you ever wanted people to see you? Have you ever wanted to fill that ego need to be seen as special or wonderful or amazing or simply a good person, a good husband, a good wife, a good father, a good mother, a good friend, a good spouse, a good whatever? What we understand from attachment is if you experience, in essence, that secure attachment or earned attachment later, you don't spend your time trying to be seen by everybody because you're already okay. The key in all of this, the result of all of this is not to convince yourself that you're good. I think if I were to sum up the most common mistake that human beings make in psychological terms, it is this idea that the goal is to be good, a good something or other. That doesn't work because we know at a deeper level, all of us know that yes, sometimes we're wise and sometimes we're ignorant. Sometimes we're generous and sometimes we're stingy. Sometimes we're creative and sometimes we're stuck. Sometimes our talents flourish and sometimes we just flop and fail. So we know that. So the key is not to convince yourself to come to the conclusion or arrive at the idea that I am good. The key is to learn to see all of your parts, the good and the bad and everything in between, and still love yourself. That's the magic. That's the secret in all of this. And how do you learn to see all of your parts, the good and the bad and everything in between, and still love yourself? You do it by spending time with somebody who sees you, who regards you, like I said earlier, with compassion. Further, children learn who they are by how we feel about them, not by what we say to them. That's why the words that I gave you earlier are just approximations. They're just illustrating a certain kind of energy. If your child comes to you and says, I don't trust you, go back to that chart. Go back to the audacity to be you and see if you can answer with, thank you for telling me. I'm glad you could share that with me. I want to understand. I want to learn more. Children learn who they are by how we feel and think about them. That's why parents who hope to foster a secure attachment must work out their feelings and thoughts with a therapist so these feelings don't leak into the child. Conversely, how does a child get wired for addictions and codependency? Parents tell the child when they're upset, when they're happy, when they're disappointed, proud, worried, etc., in an attempt to manage the child's behavior. And the child begins to be taught, conditioned by us, parents, to believe, to think that what other people think and feel about them is about them. So when we talk about children who are vulnerable to peer pressure, who don't know who they are, I hear parents give lectures to children all the time that you need to love yourself, that no amount of love from the world is going to satisfy that need that you have inside, and it has to come from within to love yourself. It's just half the picture. I hear so many times people say that self-esteem is an inside job. It's not, and it never has been. Period. End of story. The debate is over with this. Self-esteem comes in the simplest way to put it, in the context that we grow up in. Right? That's what we call it, developmental trauma or developmental nurturing or attachment. Sometimes it's called complex trauma. It's not the things that happen to you. It's not, this is good news. It's not whether or not you were sexually assaulted by somebody. It's not whether or not you have a learning difficulty and you struggle in school. It's not whether or not you lost somebody that you love or care about, which is a horrible and terrific trauma in childhood. It's not those things that happen to you. It's how the people around you held you in those moments through those processes. Could they sit with you? Could they listen? Could they tolerate and hold space for the grief, for the pain, for the sadness? And what does that require? What does that ask of us? It asks us to do our work. So that's the quick overview on attachment theory. Now, I came across this book, like I mentioned, when my children were young, and I read it to them, and I didn't think much of it. I'm going to qualify this before I get into this. The name of the book is You Are Special, written by Max Lucado. And I'm going to qualify it by saying the allusions in here are an allusion to God. Eli. We'll find out about the character Eli. Eli is a metaphor from the author's perspective of God, is what I can surmise, what it sounds like. And that'll become clear as I read the book to you. But take a step back, take a wider view. It's really, again, about spending time with somebody who can see you. So let me read the story to you without any further ado. I'm going to read it to you just like I did to my children. And if you're watching, you can see the images that are from the book. It goes like this. The Remicks were a small wooden people carved by a woodworker named Eli. His workshop sat on a hill overlooking their village. Each Wemmick was different. Some had big noses, others had large eyes, some were tall, and others were short. Some wore hats, others wore coats. But all were made by the same carver, and all lived in the village. And all day, day after day, the Wemmicks did the same thing. They gave each other stickers. Each Wemmick had a box of golden star stickers and a box of gray dot stickers. Up and down the streets all over the city, people spent their days sticking stars or dots on one another. The pretty ones, those with smooth wood and fine paint, always got stars. But if the wood was rough or the paint chipped, the Wemmicks gave dots. The talented one got stars too. Some could lift big sticks high above their heads and jump over tall boxes. Still others knew big words and could sing pretty songs. Everyone gave them stars. Some Wemmicks had stars all over them. Every time they got a star, it made them feel good. It made them want to do something else and get another star. Others, though, could do little. They got dots. Punchinello was one of these. He tried to jump high like the others, but always fell. And when he fell, the others would gather around him and give him dots. Sometimes when he fell, his wood got scratched, so the people would give him more dots. Then when he would try to explain why he failed, he would say something silly, and the Wemmicks would give him more dots. After a while, he had so many dots that he didn't want to go outside. He was afraid he would do something dumb, such as forget his hat or step in the water. And then the people would give him another dot. In fact, he had so many gray dots that some people would come up and give him one for no reason at all. He deserves lots of dots, the wooden people would agree with one another. He's not a good wooden person. After a while, Punchinello believed them. I'm not a good Wemmick, he would say. The few times he went outside, he hung around other Wemmicks who had lots of dots. He felt better around them. One day, Punchinello met a Wemmick who was unlike any he had ever met. She had no dots or stars. She was just wooden. Her name was Lucia. It wasn't that people didn't try to give her stickers. It's just that the stickers didn't stick. Some of the Wemmicks admired Lucia for having no dots, so they would run up and give her a star, but it would fall off. Others would look down on her for having no stars, so they would give her a dot, but it wouldn't stay either. That's the way I want to be, thought Punchinello. I don't want anyone's marks. So he asked the stickerless Wemmick how she did it. It's easy, Lucia replied. Every day I go and see Eli. Eli? Yes, Eli, the wood carver. I sit in the workshop with him. Why? Why don't you find out for yourself? Go up the hill. He's there. And with that, the Wemmick, who had no stickers, turned and skipped away. But will he want to see me? Punchinello cried out. Lucia didn't hear. So Punchinello went home. He sat near a window and watched the wooden people as they scurried around, giving each other stars and dots. It's not right, he muttered to himself, and then he decided to go see Eli. Punchinello walked up the narrow path to the top of the hill and stepped into the big shop. His wooden eyes widened at the size of everything. The stool was tall as he was. He had to stretch on his tiptoes to see the top of the workbench. A hammer was long as his arm. Punchinello swallowed hard. I'm not staying here. He turned to leave. Then he heard his name. Punchinello? The voice was deep and strong. Punchinello stopped. Punchinello, how good to see you. Come and let me have a look at you. Punchinello turned slowly and looked at the large bearded craftsman. You know my name? The little Wemmick asked. Of course I do. I made you. Eli stooped down and picked him up and set him on the bench. The maker spoke thoughtfully as he looked at the gray dots. Looks like you have been given some bad marks. I didn't mean to, Eli. I really tried hard. Oh, you don't have to defend yourself to me, child. I don't care what the other Wemmicks think. You don't? No, and you shouldn't either. Who are they to give you stars or dots? They are Wemmicks just like you. What they think doesn't matter, Punchinello. All that matters is what I think, and I think you are pretty special. Punchinello laughed. Me? Special? Why, I can't walk fast. I can't jump. My paint is peeling. Why do I matter to you? Eli looked at Punchinello, put his hands on those small wooden shoulders, and spoke very slowly. Because you're mine. That's why you matter to me. Punchinello had never had anyone look at him like this, much less his maker, and he didn't know what to say. Every day I've been hoping you'd come, Eli explained. I came because I met someone who had no marks, said Punchinello. I know, she told me about you. Why didn't the stickers stay on her? The maker spoke softly. Because she has decided that what I think is more important than what they think. The stickers only stick if you let them. What? The stickers only stick if they matter to you. The more you trust my love, the less you care about their stickers. I'm not sure I understand, Eli smiled. You will, but it takes time. You've got a lot of marks. For now, just come and see me every day and let me remind you of how much I care. Eli lifted Punchinello off the bench and set him on the floor. Remember, Eli said to the Wemmick as he walked out the door, you are special because I made you, and I don't make mistakes. Punchinello didn't stop, but in his heart he thought, I think he really means it. And when he did, a dot fell to the ground. That's what it looks like and sounds like. And again, if you can just excuse and translate, if you have a strong belief in a higher power and that works for you, wonderful. But since so many people are limited in their ability to experience the love from a higher power, including myself, they find somebody in their life, like a therapist, like a mentor, like a sponsor, like a group of members of AA or Al-Anon or support group, like an intensive program at Evoke Therapy programs. They find a place where people can look at them with compassion, with understanding, with non-judgment. And after a while, like I explained, the dots don't stick anymore. That's what I mean when I tell you it's not about learning to ignore your pain or your frustration when your child is mad or when your spouse is mad. If your child calls you names or says they hate you or wants to ignore you. It's not about that those things hurt you and you learn to repress or not feel the hurt. It's after a time they don't hurt anymore. And the reason that people aren't teaching you about attachment theory in school, the reason that my professors, almost none of them, all of them had doctoral degrees and were tenured, and almost none of them taught me about any of this, is because they have no experience with it. But once you have that experience, all you want to do is share it with everybody else. I love being a therapist. I always have. Since I started college, I knew what I wanted to do my entire life. But it wasn't until around 2010 or 11 when I had this experience culminating that I'm describing, where spending week after week with my therapist, making lots of mistakes, confessing to my idiocy, right? Showing up in therapy and telling my therapist all the horrible, rotten things I'd said and done from my past and my present. And when she looked at me with compassion and understanding, something started to change. I started to think about myself the way that she thinks about me. I started to love myself the way that she loved me. I started to tolerate and enjoy my own presence the way that she seemed to do it. I internalized, in essence, a copy of her. I almost got tearful when I was reading that child story to you, because it's just like that with our children, right? Once they have a lot of gray dots, they don't want to go outside. They don't want to go around other people. And people give them more gray dots just for having gray dots. You know that. We judge kids. And then all they want to do, just like it says in the book, is hang around other people with gray dots. That's the only place they feel comfortable. You want to know why your child hangs around that bad influence, or why their partner, their girlfriend, their boyfriend is that really negative or toxic individual. It's because they would rather be around them and not be judged than be around parents or others who are anxious to fix them, who regard them with anxiety and worry because something must be wrong with them. And that's why nobody teaches you about it, because you have to have the experience of it. Let me read to you the clinical version of the Wemmick story. Okay? This is from J.D. Gill, one of her early books, My Therapist. She said, the experience of seeing one's base, one's history, one's context from a different perspective can be profound. One way this happens is by allowing ourselves to be honest and open with someone who does not react the way our parents did. For example, what was once very bad at home is now nothing. This difference in experience allows for the realization that things could be different. One's assigned position in one's past is not necessarily one's assigned position in the universe. So you go to therapy. You eventually summon up the courage to show the parts of yourself that you've been afraid. Like I said, you tell the therapist that you're mad at them. You've been punished for doing that with authority figures in the past. You've been made to think that it was your problem, that your filter is broken, that your perspective is off. So you challenge the therapist. And if you have an adult, capable, empathic therapist, somebody who's evolved and done their own work, they welcome all of your feelings, not just the good ones and the happy ones. And you start to have a different experience with that therapist than you've had with your parents, because your parents still haven't worked out their ego, right? Your parents are still trying to be good. Your parents are still trying to fight the battle and to fix the wound inside of them that they didn't have from childhood. So you summon up the courage. Sometimes it looks like, and you can hear it in the story that I just shared, you go to therapy and you want to quit. It's a strange workshop that Punchinello walked into. The stool was as tall as he was. He had to stand on his tippy toes just to see over the desk. All of those are metaphors for how uncomfortable it is, how foreign it is to walk into the therapist's office. See, that's the gift of metaphor in psychotherapy, folks, is that story is giving us a secret. But because we're so metaphorically challenged, we get lost in the literalness of everything. And if you have the courage eventually to confess to the therapist, to the sponsor, in AA and NA and all the 12-step programs, if you don't know this, in your 4th step and your 5th step, you make an inventory of all the people that you have wronged, all the mistakes that you have made. And in the 5th step, you share that long story of your sins, if you will, with somebody. And they don't judge you. They don't ask you to do penance. They don't exact some kind of toll or payment for your sins. They simply just say, you're in the right place. That's how you've been sometimes. I can hear your broken heart through all of your stories. And when somebody receives you that way, that's why in Les Mis, that's why when the bishop gives Jean Valjean the candlesticks, everything changes. That's what it means when you see these quotes on social media that says, where there is grace, there is no shame. Shame is that urge to hide that Punchinello had. That urge to not go outside. That urge to not go around other people for fear that they're going to get more gray dots. So you keep going to therapy. You keep going past. You have to find a therapist who's capable, because otherwise, if they're interested in fixing you or treating your symptoms, you can feel that you're not safe. You can feel that they have some anxiety too. And Most therapists have that. Most therapists don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm not saying that from an arrogant perspective. I didn't know what I was talking about until I was about 40 years old. After practicing therapy for more than a decade, I had no idea of the depth and the power of what I'm describing to you today. It was only during my midlife crisis, my separation, my time in therapy, my experiencing what I thought was just an utter failure. The failure was my life. And my therapist regarded me with compassion and with love. Like she said to me the one time, if you came in here, I wrote this in the book and I used different words. I won't quote her perfectly today so people won't delete the podcast. She said to me one day when I was struggling to admit something that I'd said or done or felt, she said, Brad, you don't understand. If you came in here telling me that you were having sex with a chicken, I would assume you have a good reason and I would just want to understand why. And when she said that, I was acutely aware I had never been in a room like this with anybody like this in my life. And when I say that to the children in the wilderness, the young men that I've worked with over the years, when I tell this story, when I teach this principle, I often teach the principle by sharing the story about Bob Dylan, where somebody asked him when his son had a #1 album in the early 1990s, and a reporter asked Bob Dylan, are you proud of your son? And Bob's response was, it's irrelevant to me. It makes no difference to me whether he has a #1 album or not. And what Bob was suggesting is it's not about gold stars and gray dots. When I tell young men this story, when I tell them that story, when I teach this principle, they will inevitably, almost every one of them, look at me. And in some version, they will say, nobody thinks like this. Nobody does. And my response to them is, I understand how you feel. I thought so too. I remember telling my therapist in 2010 or 11, saying, I know how to make people love you, specifically how to make people fall in love with you. And she looked surprised and said, how's that again? And I said, you just take care of their needs and deny your own. And she looked at me compassionately and said, I think it's possible for you to be who you are and still be loved. And I looked at her like she was playing a game or being sarcastic or being crazy. I assumed everybody knew that that's the way you make people love you. You just deny your needs and take care of theirs. And then they'll want you around. Then they'll like you. Then they'll love you. So our children in the wilderness, our children in treatment, the children that I work with, sometimes the children that I work with are 50 and 60 years old. Sometimes they've never been to a treatment program. Sometimes it's in outpatient therapy. Sometimes it's in the lectures that I give when I'm doing my public speaking. Part of the goal of this podcast and this webinar and the books that I write is to give you that sense, that feeling. Part of what I do now, which I didn't do for the first 10 or 15 years of my career, is I talk pretty consistently about my horrible, rotten self. See, I don't want to come on here saying to you, I figured it out. I've arrived. I don't mistreat my children. I don't mistreat my wife, because that's just a lie. I do sometimes. I'm a tough person to live with. I'm a handful, as are you. And if you don't know that, it's going to be really hard on the people around you. But by knowing that, I can work on myself. I can apologize. I can make amends. I can try better tomorrow. I can, in essence, both in words and in the feelings that I have, say to my family members, my stuff is not your stuff. My feelings are not about you. My anger is not your problem. I can say to them by my actions, what other people think about you is none of your business, including me. Do you see how this all comes to the same principle? And this is a book that I was reading to my children. Back then, I translated it to be about God also, because again, I was metaphorically challenged, didn't understand the depths and the layers of things like this that were written. And now it's clear to me. So I wanted to share that with you today. It's gonna be a shorter broadcast than typical, because I get asked so often. I see people asking and wondering so often how you turn around this feeling about yourself. How can you as a parent How can you as a parent find a deeper source of truth? And my experience is that you can't do it on your own. You have to do it in relationship to somebody else. And the hardest part of that is that requires courage to take the risk. See, we are an experiential program. We use psychodrama in our intensive program. We use camping and small group living, wilderness in our program for teens. But that's not the real experience of therapy. The experience of therapy, the experiential part of therapy, the thing that makes the difference is walking into that room or that therapist's office or that circle and telling the truth about yourself. Because the risk is what's going to happen is what has happened to you so many times in the past. People's fears and anxieties and shame are going to be put on you. So if you have the courage to tell the therapist the truth, to confess, to describe your horrible, rotten self, like I told you, my friend Peter, I asked him after many years, I said, Peter, are you still going to therapy? And he said, no. And I thought it was because of money. And I said, is it money? He said, no, it's not money. I just think it's a waste of time because I go and I lie to my therapist every week, trying to impress her. And I laughed and I said, Peter, that's what everybody does. I still do it in therapy sometimes. So you see the secret right there? I still do it in therapy sometimes. I still do it as a client. So my point for all of you is that to heal, you have to spend time around an empathic, capable other who sees you differently than your earliest context. And by the way, if you know what I'm talking about, if you have a sense of what I'm talking about, there's no questions. You're just grateful that somebody else has named it. If what I'm saying sounds crazy or off or strange or confusing, it's because you don't have the experience of it. But that's what our myths and our stories, that's what Les Mis was supposed to be teaching us. That's what Victor Hugo, when he wrote it, one of the many lessons he was trying to teach us. That's what religion and a relationship with a higher power can do for many people. Like I said, that wasn't the healing balm for me, but I know other people will share with you that they have that experience. I'm happy to take any questions that have come in if there are any. I usually don't take them during the topics, but I knew tonight's broadcast would be a little bit shorter, so I'm happy to take any. And while they're being queued up, I'll just go over the upcoming events. My two books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, Learning to Love Your Horrible Rotten Self, are available on Amazon and Audible. If you want to do a deep dive and do your own work or have a therapy accelerator, our version of it is called Finding You. It's a 4.5-day intensive. August 16th is the next offering, September 20th after that. We also have online versions, September 15th through 17th. They're half the time online, and you don't have to travel in about a third of the cost. We also have a Returning to You for people that have already been to Finding You. You can also do custom Finding Connection intensives for couples and for co-parents, or Finding Family for any configuration of parents. Contact intensives@evoketherapy.com for more information. We have support groups for current and alumni families. August 10th is the next August 10th is the next offering, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. We've switched all of our broadcasts, so all of my broadcasts will be at 6 p.m. and all of the support groups for our wilderness families will be at 7 p.m. We also have an alumni-only meeting once a month. August 22nd is the next offering at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. We have an intensive group, support group once a month at the next one is August 8th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Go to our website at evoketherapy.com/family involvement for more information. We also have family treks for families that you can do a multi-day therapeutic experience in the wilderness with your child or your family. You can do that in the middle of the program, at the end of the program. You can do it even if you don't have a child or have never been to wilderness therapy. It's creating that same experience for families that we have for our young people. Contact admissions@evoketherapy.com for more information. If your child is a wilderness client, talk to your child's therapist about that opportunity if you're interested. We also have virtual coaching for people all over the country, all over the world. Parents, couples, families, individuals, any issue you can imagine that is subacute. We don't deal with highly acute psychiatric cases, but aside from that, if you want to work on transitioning, if you want to work on parent coaching, co-parenting, codependency, addictions, a whole host of issues. These are our therapists and coaches that are immersed in the attachment-based model that I've described to you. We ask all current parents to go to 6 12-step support groups, any combination of alanon.org, coda.org, familiesanonymous.org, adultchildren.org, or refugerecovery.org, which is a Buddhist-inspired support group. You can also go to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI.org, to find free classes and resources in your local community. All of these broadcasts are available on Spotify or your favorite podcast app. Just search Finding You an Evoke Therapy Podcast or go to soundcloud.com. You can also watch the rebroadcast on Evoke's YouTube channel by going there. You can find Evoke Therapy programs and me, Dr. Brad Reedy, on Twitter, Threads, and Instagram using the handles @Evoke Therapy and @Dr. Brad Reedy, respectively. You can find the Intensives program on Instagram using the handle @Evoke Therapy Intensives. On Facebook, you can find us by searching Evoke Therapy programs or Evoke Therapy Intensives. And of course, our blog has wonderful content curated and added to each week. If you want to give back to people who can't afford treatment, the 3 charitable partners that we work with that can take your tax-deductible donation are choosementalhealth.org, sky'sthelimitfund.org, or evokefamilyfoundation.org. You can earmark your tax-deductible donation for a specific population or issue, or for a specific program if that's your desire. All right, I'm happy to take any questions if any have come in, Olivia. Have they? Looks like I either did a really good job or a really bad job, that there are no additional things. Somebody writes, thank you for sharing more information about attachment and reading the book You Are Special, and you're absolutely welcome. Thanks for joining us. I hope this is excuse me. I hope this is a helpful point of contact if you're listening or watching. And for and on behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you, as always, thanks for showing up to these and being willing to do your work. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.